Hello everyone, my name is Ronak and you're watching VectoArt. In today's video, we will take an overview of Blend for Visual Studio, how it is different from Visual Studio 2022, how to install it, and what are the tooling options. So without any further ado, let's get started. And for those who haven't subscribed to my channel, please do subscribe to my channel, it means a lot. So let's start by what is Blend. So Blend for Visual Studio helps you design XAML-based Windows and web applications. It provides the same basic XAML design experience as Visual Studio and adds Visual Designer for advanced tasks such as animations and behaviors. We will compare them both at the end of this video. So let's start by installing Blend for Visual Studio. To do that, I have already installed it, but I will show you how you can install it. So if it is a fresh installation of Visual Studio, you will have this Visual Studio installer first, which you will launch. And once you launch it, you will have three options, either to choose Community Edition, Enterprise, or Professional. I have selected Community Edition, and once you install the Community Edition, while installing, you will get the options that I will get when I click on Modify. So you will have a similar screen when you install Visual Studio Blend, Visual Studio, and here you can see these workloads. So to install Blend in Visual Studio installer, choose either Universal Windows Platform Development or .NET Desktop Development. Both of these workloads include the Blend for Visual Studio component. So you can select that and install. Once the installation is done, you will have Blend for Visual Studio on your machine. So next topic is to see what are the tools available. So I have launched Visual Studio Blend here, and I'll go ahead and create a new project. So you can select WPF app. You can also select it from either templates here. Let's click on next and let the name be as is. Let's create. So we have our window or the designer loaded. So let's start by taking a look at the tools panel. So you can use the tools panel in Blend for Visual Studio to create and modify objects in your application. The tools panel will appear on the left hand side of the XAML designer when you open the .xaml file. And here you have these options. So let's start from the top. We have the selection tools, we have the view tools, we have the brush tools, followed by the object tools, and finally the asset tools. So some of the tools in the tools panel have variations. For example, if you go and see the rectangle, you can choose an ellipse or a line. To access these variations, you will have to right click and choose these options from here. Similarly, if you go to this, you have the option of grid, canvas, wrap panel, dock panel, and so on. And also here you have the button, checkbox, and so on. Finally, what is the selection tool? So the selection tool is basically to select objects and path. You can also use this direct selection tool to select nested objects and path segments. For example, if I create a rectangle here, I have this rectangle, but with the selection tool, I can only make adjustments to the size of this. But with the use of this direct selection tool, so with the use of this direct selection tool, I can select this, convert it into a path, and then use these anchor points to move them as I please. So this is the use of the selection tool, direct selection tool. Next are the view tools. So these view tools are used to adjust the view of the artboard, such as panning and zoom. So next we have the brush tools, so which are self-explanatory. We can use these tools to change the visual attributes of the objects, such as transforming and applying gradients to them. So I can do this. I think I have added it to the grid itself. Let me undo it and let me add a gradient here. So in this way, you can edit the visual attributes of the objects. Next, we have the object tools. For example, the pen tool, which we can use to draw paths on the UI. And then next is the rectangle, the shape tools like ellipse, line, and so on. And then we have the grid, the canvas, stack panel, wrap panel, and so on. Next is the asset window. The asset window contains all variables controls similar to the toolbox in Visual Studio. In addition to the controls, you will find everything you can add to your artboard in the asset window, including styles, behaviors, effects, shapes, media, and so on. So next, the interesting one would be the timeline, objects and timeline. So let me go ahead and delete this first. So let me make some changes to the UI before I explain what I want to achieve. So here we have the objects and timeline window. You can also find it here in other windows or here on the view. So next, let me create one ellipse somewhere here. Okay. Now, the objects and timeline tool will help you organize the objects on your artboard. If you see here, we have an ellipse and this path. So you can see, we can organize it. You can move it, move around the grid and so on. Next is the timeline, that is for the storyboard, and that will help you animate objects. So to animate objects, you will have to add a storyboard. So storyboards help you animate objects on your artboard. This To understand more about this, you will have to check out my other videos where I have explained the storyboards in detail and with much more complex animations, which can be useful for your future UI design. So moving ahead, my goal here is to move this path inside this ellipse. So to do that, I will select this path, add a keyframe, which is the starting point, and on the point 0.5 keyframe, I will move this path inside this circle. So I will just select this path and move this inside this. And while we are doing this, make sure you are recording the storyboard, otherwise your actions will not be captured. So once you do that, if you run the animation, you will see that we have a smooth animation. If you want a much faster animation, you can move the keyframes closer and then you have a faster animation. Now you have some options for the storyboards. You can either close the storyboard from here, and to delete a storyboard, you can go here, you can select the storyboard, and as soon as you select, you see that the storyboard is recording. And you can pause it from here, and then you can go from here and you can either duplicate it, reverse it, delete, rename, and close. So I will not go ahead and delete it, but I will leave it as is. So these are the tools and behaviors and animations that you have in Visual Studio Blend. So let's now see what we have in Visual Studio and compare it with Blend. So before that, let me go ahead and save everything that I've created. Let me launch Visual Studio and open the solution file. Okay, so the designer is loading and we have our designer here. So let me park it to the right side, and here we have our window. So here the major difference that you will see is the toolbox here, and here you do not have that designer features in Visual Studio. So most of the time, what I do is I design my applications here on Blend and then open it in Visual Studio to do the further programming on those design elements. So here you also have a toolbox, the same tools that you have in the asset panel, but in addition to these tools you have these options to convert an object into a path, which you do not see here in Visual Studio. Then you have these pen tools to create paths. Then you do not see this objects and timeline, where you can create storyboards and have a better visibility of the elements. So all these features are missing. So if you want to, you can also create a storyboard or an animation in Visual Studio, but it will take much more effort, because you will have to write this relevant XAML here in the XAML file. But here it is more, in Blend it is more with the user to create it on the designer, and not working on the XAML. So those are the major differences between using Blend for Visual Studio and just plain Visual Studio. Hope you all liked watching this video. If you do, please give this video a thumbs up, like, share, and do subscribe to my channel.